And we are back with another episode of From the Rafters. Sam and I are here recording on Thursday, July 21st, and we are joined by John Karalis of Boston Sports Journal and the Locked On Celtics podcast. How are you doing today, John?
I'm great. How you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for joining us, John. We're doing a little pre-show research. This is the 5th time you've joined us, so we wanted to just tell you that we appreciate you. Yeah, right?
I'll see you guys.
I was going to say thank you for putting up with us for that long. We appreciate
you. I was a 5-time guest.
Yeah, I didn't realize either. We'll keep it rolling. I think Sam is frozen there on the YouTube screen, but he'll be back. He usually jumps back in here after he freezes for a minute. But yeah, 5 times was a bit surprising. I was looking through our Spotify and like Control F, searching some people, and I thought it was like, I want to bring it up. Maybe it's like second or third time, but 5 was a shock. But anyways, all that's to say, thank you for joining us again. We appreciate it. Sam's, I think, back in the room at this point. I've stalled for long enough. But yeah, we figured we'd roll through some of that. Welcome back, Sam. Welcome back to the show. He might be lagging out again, but we're just gonna roll through it. We're used to it. Celtics Summer League just wrapped up a little less than a week ago. I think that this point time's an infinite loop, so I forget. Celtics ended up going 3-2. If I do believe JD Davison played pretty well, and Mfiondu Kabengele both are in two-way spots. Celtics still have a few roster spots left from the Malcolm Brogdon trade. So we just wanted to get some general thoughts of yours on Summer League to start, and we can tie it into the roster spots after that.
Yeah, I mean, Summer League this year was kind of, I thought, anticlimactic. The Celtics now that they're in a championship mode, Summer League is more meaningless than kind of ever. Like, none of these guys are going to make an impact on this team, I don't think. If maybe you get some minutes here and there from Kabengele now that he's on a two-way contract, but the reality is, as much as we love to get caught up in this guy played well and he looked great, it's Summer League, and a lot of these results, call them false positives. They're just, you look great, and sure, Kabengele looked really good at times, and Davison looked good at times, and Matt Ryan looked good at times. The question is, how much of this is truly translatable? And people will say, hey, this thing that he does and that thing that he does. But until he does it against NBA competition, we don't know. He had a lot of offensive rebounds, Kabengele. But also a lot of guys are out of position in Summer League. A lot of bigs are overcompensating. And you really have got to look at the totality of it. One, the defense gets blown by on the perimeter a lot, which means a big has to really help, and they're not great at help and recovery because the defense in Summer League is terrible. That leaves opportunities for offensive rebounds. Is he going to get those against any level of NBA competition? We'll have to wait and see. But the Celtics saw enough that made them think, hey, let's give this kid, he's going to be 25, so they saw enough to give him the two-way. And we'll see. Davison is an intriguing guy. He showed some really good passing ability, but his ball handling needs some work. His shooting needs some work. I think he's a good candidate to be a project on a two-way deal, and we'll see if he contributes on the floor or in a trade within the next couple of years. And but other than that, I advocate for Matt Ryan to get a look. And if that's it, if that's where we get then I'm fine with that. I don't think we need to spend a ton of energy worrying about how much these Summer League guys are going to contribute, because it probably won't be a whole lot.
Yeah, right. They were all hanging out watching games courtside throughout the playoffs all spring, right? Matt Ryan in street clothes for most of it. He impressed me real early, though. In the games he played, he looked great. Looked great in the first game that they got slapped around. Obviously had the game where he hit the game winner, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he takes any kind of step into the rotation. It's going to be tough with Hauser, I think.
Yeah, and look, I thought Ryan on a two-way deal made a lot of sense. I wasn't really keen on giving a big that two-way deal, but the Celtics had a different opinion. Okay, so be it. I think Matt Ryan shows an ability to come off a screen and hit a shot and take it with confidence. But again, is he taking and making that shot against a defense that is either switching? What's he doing against the switch? Is he getting those openings against teams that are quicker with quicker defenders and longer defenders? So as much as I was like, yeah, Matt Ryan could be a good, one of the guys that you keep. Very easily could have been. I very easily could have been mesmerized by the makes, and you overvalue hot shooting in the summer league, and you just, it's an easy way to get sucked into a performance and then look bad afterwards. I was like, oh, geez, I thought they should have kept this guy, and he just never hooks on anymore. So who knows?
I was big on Matt Ryan, and I still am to some degree, but I think a lot of it stems back to the Max Struses and Garrison Matthewses of the world. And realistically speaking, and Sam yells at me all the time for this, they were never going to get minutes. They weren't going to get minutes in the Celtic rotation. That's how it works. But you look at the track record, at least keeping one of them around on, like you said, a two-way deal, which is no longer a possibility, but keeping them on the end of the bench, developing them in the G League, maybe they turn into something down the line. That's the intriguing part I think you get from Matt Ryan from what he showed in the summer league.
Situation matters. That's one of my favorite things to say. Situation matters in the NBA, and if you're not going to be in the right situation, you can take a guy who is a 20-point-a-game scorer and put him in the wrong situation. All of a sudden, he's shooting 40% and averaging 14 a game, and you're like, what the hell happened to this guy? It has to be the right opportunity, and sometimes for a guy like Max Strus, you have to go through what do you have, an ACL tear? You have to go through the adversity, and then you have to fight to come back. Then you have to appreciate certain things, and maybe he changes his approach along the way, and maybe it changes his motivation along the way, and he just has to understand a lot of things, how to handle himself and his career better. So just because he did well somewhere else, and that goes for any player, just because a player does well somewhere else doesn't mean, wow, this guy would have been good with the Celtics, especially one of these role players. Jason Tatum's going to be good everywhere, right? Those guys are going to be good everywhere. Jaylen Brown is going to be good everywhere. The role players aren't going to be good everywhere because you have to have the right mix. You have to be playing off the right guys. You have to be in the right system, and you have to be in the right mindset. And if you're not any of those things, then things could go badly for you. So I do caution people to not make that leap. Hey, Max Strus is playing well, and I'll say it, and say, hey, it's tough to watch a guy like this get away.
Yeah,
but you also have to know that there's also no guarantee that if he had stayed, if they didn't keep Taco Fall and had just kept Javonte Green and Max Strus, maybe Max Strus is still, maybe he would have been at Summer League this summer trying to hook on. Things could have gone very differently for him. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
That always drives me insane. I mean, Jack, you said it. It's always the people on Twitter. Oh, they let Strus walk. It's going to come back to bite them. They never give these guys chances. Like if Neesmith
didn't
plays
draft
well
Desmond
this year,
Bane,
right? Didn't draft Bane. Didn't draft Sadiq Bey. Like if Neesmith plays well for the Pacers, that's all you're going to see is and if like say Brogdon gets hurt. Oh, like they should have kept Neesmith. Yeah. Look at the leap he took this year. They gave up on him. People don't get it.
Neesmith would be the poster boy for proving, I think, the situation thing right. Yeah, because Neesmith is very much the type of guy who was not going to get minutes in Boston. And people will say, well, yeah, he should have gotten minutes. But like, at whose expense? Are you just going to say, play him 35 minutes and let him work through things? And if you lose a couple of games because of it, so what? No, you can't have it both ways. You can't say you should have played him and be like, all right, well, that's 4 losses that you're going to add to the list. Let's just say people will be like, no, I don't want to add losses to the list. Well, you're not going to be a 5-win team and also let young guys play through their mistakes. That's just not how it goes. So if Neesmith, and I think Neesmith can go to Indy, and I think he has the potential to thrive in a situation where there's no expectations whatsoever. It's a very calm, nice Midwestern atmosphere. Everybody's polite. It's just a nice little place to play. People love the basketball there. It's all lining up for him to figure things out. And if he does, good for him. People should just say, oh, okay, he needed that space. But Boston was never going to give him that level of space while trying to win a championship.
It's true. And just to piggyback on what you said, one, with the Celtics, you could tell every time he was getting on the floor, he was pressing. trying to get his feet under him, especially shooting wise. We all know he can shoot. The players on the team saying he can shoot, and he's shooting air balls out there. And yeah, again, he's going to be able to make those mistakes with the Pacers. He's not going to have a short leash. There's not going to be that pressure. And you just have to be happy for him, really. He didn't shoot his way out of town. He didn't, do the Kyrie or whatever, right? I mean, why be upset about that? I don't get it.
Yeah.
Well, because it's Twitter.
That's true.
Exactly. Boston fans want it both ways. They'll always want it both
Yeah,
ways.
the fan base, like you said, you add like 4 losses. And I remember, Jack, you had a tweet that popped off because they lost to the Pacers in like March or something after they just ripped off like 6 in a row. And you were like, this team can't win every game. But people were legitimately upset that they lost to a Pacers team that must have shot 60% from 3 that day.
I remember that game. Yeah, it was frustrating. But on the topics of wings, Celtics have 3 open roster spots. They obviously traded away Neesmith and Daniel Tice in the deal for Brogdon, along with Malik Fitz, Nick Stauskas, Juwan Morgan. Now they have these roster spots. A lot of people are saying, use it on a big, get a backup big who's going to back up Al Horford, Robert Williams. The Celtics, from what they've said, seem fine with Luke Cornett in that role because, I mean, you consider Al Horford, Robert Williams, Gallinari, Grant Williams. You've got an okay big rotation there with Cornett as sort of the 5th guy, even though Gallinari can't really play center. You don't really have too much legitimate wing depth. Like Brogdon can play up, Grant Williams can play down, but you don't have any guys in that slots. What are you prioritizing with those open spots? Are you looking for, and realistically speaking, none of these guys are going to get big time minutes, but just for the purpose of having those, safety valves, if an injury comes along, are you looking at veteran wings? Are you looking at taking a chance on a summer league guy who could develop and then play some minutes if people get hurt? Like, what do you think the Celtics should do to fill those 3 spots?
Well, I don't think it's going to matter a ton outside of, like, you do want to get a third big. I think what the Celtics are doing right now is they're kind of gaming the 2-way system with Kabengele and using him as sort of a 5th big. So you have your 2 starting bigs in Horford and Rob. I think you carry Cornett into the season and you kind of see how it goes. I think you might just, if you want to carry 14 guys and you're at 12 right now, right? There's 3 more
12 right now.
Yeah,
so you let Matt Ryan and Broderick Thomas and those guys kind of fight it out for the last guaranteed spot, which would be, a partial guarantee or something like that. Then you go get a backup big that you can either you go get a backup big or you sign just a veteran minimum guy, the wing shooter, and then you fill that other spot at the trade deadline or somewhere after December 15th, because you still have 2 TPEs left, and you just have to be careful with how you spend the money, because at this point the Celtics are going to be paying over about $50 million in the luxury tax. And I always have to preface this with, I don't care how much money they spend.
Yes.
I personally, you should have used the TPE. You should have used the Fournier one and use these other 2 and then have a $200 million tax bill. What do I care? But that's not realistic. So I have to, I'm trying to think like, well, what would the owners say? And I think that they're still going to want to be careful about just throwing money away. Because if you sign a guy for $2 million, that's, you tax that times 3.75. So that all of a sudden that player becomes a $10 million plus player. And you have to look at, if it's, let's say it's, I don't know, Carmelo Anthony, which, God, just punch me in the face if that happens. But adding him would cost more than the minimum. And so you say, are we adding him to cut him later? Or are we adding him because we want that depth, that just in case? You just have to be careful about that just in case money, because what you don't want to do is sign a guy that have to cut him. That's why when people say, well, Dwight Howard or Boogie Cousins or Hassan Whiteside. I'm like, okay, yeah, but all of those guys are fraught with peril. I don't like any of them. And if any of them has an attitude about their role or doesn't fit well, and you have to cut one of those guys, you're still paying the tax on the dead money. And now you've wasted a lot of money. And the owners will sit there and say, yeah, we're willing to spend the money, but what we would hope to avoid is messing up like that on the fringes on an 11th or 12th or 13th man. And all of a sudden that dead money is costing us real money, $5, $6, $7, $8 million. And now we have to go and pay this next person. And this next person is going to get them into the next tax bracket, which would be $4.25 per dollar. And now you're paying exponentially more in taxes. And that gets you closer to the next tier. So it keeps going up every $5 million. All of this is to say, I think you have to be just very careful about how you spend the money on the last 2-3 spots, because you just don't want to be burning money. I don't think owners are willing to spend, but I think it's the burning money where they're going to be like, ugh, I don't want to do that. And on the flip side is, don't cheap out now. Like the counter argument would be like, you've gone this far, don't cheap out at the very end. Like if you're building a house and you thought it was going to be a $700,000 house and it turns out to be a $900,000 house, don't cheap out on like the last few things after you've spent all of this money. You've spent it, might as well keep spending. So it's a tough back and forth. All of that is to say, I don't know who they're going to sign.
Yeah. No, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, unless you're obviously the Warriors or the Clippers and you're just going to burn cash as much as you want.
Yeah. I mean, like the Celtics don't have a chase center. Just like,
yeah.
Like it's literally a chase like ATM where they just stick their thing in and like, oh, here's another, we're going to spend, $15 million on, whoever, whatever guy they just signed. Or if any of the Celtics owners want to invent a, new tech product that ends up becoming a billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company, then yeah, go ahead. And then the Celtics can go and spend all their money. But until then, they are on the bottom end of the tax spenders. Mm-hmm. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I said that wrong, because they're going to be like a top 5 tax paying team, but they don't have the operating income to maintain that for very long.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So were you disappointed that they didn't use the Fournier TP? I know you had tweeted that they didn't hear that they got anything worth it, but
yeah, they nothing came along that they were intrigued by that they felt was worth using it. On the one hand, yeah, it's a valuable tool that they didn't use, and they could have certainly added a quality player to that bench and just made the team more expensive. Again, I personally, John Karalis, I don't care. Spend the money, go for it. But the Wick Grossbeck, that group, I don't think were willing to spend exponentially for like Kelly Olynyk, who makes $12 million a year,
something
which
like that, yeah.
Tax that at 3.75, and now you're paying, I don't even know what that number is, 40 something, $50 million for Kelly Olynyk. Are you going to really pay him that, pay like that much money for him? No. So ultimately, once they made the trade for Brogdon, I just knew that was the trade. And ultimately, either let's pretend Brogdon made $17 million and he fit into the TPE. Then what would have happened? The Celtics would have brought him in for nothing, and then they would have cut Fitz and Stauskas and whoever else they sent, and they would have probably traded Daniel Tice because he became too expensive, and they probably would have used a first-round pick to offload Aaron Nesmith anyway. So ultimately, you get the same deal for Brogdon. It's just different structures. And because he makes $21 million or $22 million, they did it with the players. Either way, at this point on, late July, the Celtics were going to be without those players, without the TPE, and with Malcolm Brogdon. And they did it a different way. So I just basically said that's basically them using the TPE.
Did you think it was strange that he was so cheap, Brogdon?
I mean, I thought it was a little strange that I thought the price was going to be a little bit higher, but yeah, I was joking around. Like I think Brian Robb might have been the person who said this first, but totally true. If somebody had tweeted this deal at me on Twitter, like if somebody tweeted at me, I would have been like, I would have probably dunked on the tweet. I probably would have quoted you like, see, this is why you can't use the trade machine, because this is an impossible trade. No one will ever do a 5-for-1 in a first round pick like this. It's just, I would have just crapped all over the deal. And Brad Stevens did it. So now, on top of them getting a good deal, now I'm like, well, every time I do that to somebody, they're going to be like, well, that's how they got Brogdon, and I can't say anything. So
now you have to be nice to people.
I mean, I'm generally nice to people. I can't. You guys don't understand how much I hate the trade machine. I hate.
I'm with you.
I hate the who says no question, because 99% of the time it's like, well, it's obvious who says no.
Yeah.
And even this trade was such an anomaly that Brogdon was that cheap guy. It's absolutely. I mean, I guess his injury history really drove down the value, and you don't realize exactly how much it drove down his value. But most of the time, people are just saying, oh, this guy sucks, I'm going to trade him. And then you're going to say, well, why would the other team trade him? And he'd say, then all of a sudden he starts talking the guy up. Like, Aaron Nesmith sucks. You got to get him out of here. Like, okay, what's your thing? We're going to trade him to Indiana. I'm like, why would Indiana want him? Well, I mean, he's a decent shooter. He could probably, pan out. Like, you people like flip-flop in the middle of their rationale in these fake trades. You're like, well, which is it? Is he promising or is he not? So there's that stuff. And generally, it's just people trying to package up a bunch of stuff that they don't want. They find a number that works, and they're like, oh, yes, this works. Let's go. So, yeah, the trade machine drives me nuts, and it draws a visceral reaction out of me.
Both of those last two examples fit perfectly into that Brogdon trade.
Exactly. For all we know, Brad Stevens is like up in his office using like this trade mystery and like trade.mba or whatever. Like, okay, I think this will work. And then he calls him up and he's like, oh, wow, it actually.
Maybe he tricked Indiana into agreeing to the deal by sending a link, like one of those spam links that said, ha ha ha, check out this trade. When you click on it, you agree to the deal. And you're like, wait a second. Like Indiana's front office is on like with a scam, like the scam protection unit, be like, yeah, we were just robbed of Malcolm Brogdon. I was supposed to get something of value, and I got Malik Fitz. Can you help me out?
Is Malik Fitz the most valuable of all those players? I think he might be. With the celebrations
Fitz. It was fun.
He brings to the bench.
Hey,
now he's not celebrating for anyone.
I try to tell those guys over at Locked On Pacers, like, you are missing out on an elite air guitar. I mean,
he waved him, right?
He had the hips. Yeah. He had the. Oh yeah, it was more air ukulele, but it was really elite.
He brought it.
Excellent point.
But since now I know you love trades so much, I did have a question for you. Do you think the Celtics are done? Like, do you think this is the roster they walk in next season with, or they've got like a couple TPEs? I know I've seen, like, of course, on your favorite place, Twitter and just on websites, you see like, oh, the Utah Jazz are throwing around pieces like, oh, Jared Vanderbilt fits in 2P, or the Timberwolves have already this many bigs. Get Naz Reid, he's a cheap player. Like, do you think they could make on the edges move for either of those guys? You've seen Pritchard's name thrown around just because they have so many guards now. Like, do you think there is anything left to do, or do you think they're fine going into next season like this?
Yeah, it's actually, the answer is kind of like yes to both, because there's still a Donovan Mitchell trade kind of hanging out there, and there's a Kevin Durant trade kind of hanging out there, and the Celtics can still, with a $6.9 and a $5.9 million TPE, kind of hang around and say, we're kind of done. Unless you need a third team, and maybe they can say, hey, maybe we can sneak in and get this guy from Utah or this guy from New York or this guy from Brooklyn or wherever KD goes. They can still kind of be players in the trade facilitation kind of thing. And so my reaction is that they're basically done. They're gonna kind of like placeholder those last 2 roster spots. They'll go into the season and see how Luke Cornett does as the third big. December 15th will roll around, and then they'll start seeing if any better third bigs kind of shake free that they can get either for maybe a Peyton Pritchard or a pick or something in there. And I think that'll be fine. I think their team is good right now. They're basically 10 deep, depending on how you feel. But actually, no, because Grant Williams, Derek White, Malcolm Brogdon, and Danilo Gallinari, that's 9. So Peyton Pritchard would make you 10, and that's a lot. 10 is too much. So you generally want to go 9 deep. But you can hang on to Pritchard and say, hey, let's roll with this until the trade deadline. And who knows, maybe something happens that we don't see coming. So I'm good with the team the way it is. But if one of those trades comes around, star trades sometimes need a third team. Maybe the Celtics, if they kind of sneak in, and especially if it's a Utah deal where he'd probably call Brad before he calls anybody else. And say, hey, here's a $6 million player. Do you want him? And then because I'm sure Danny would love nothing more than to make a competitor better to the team that he's trying to get draft picks from. Like if he's trading Donovan Mitchell to New York, okay, fine. I'm going to send him to New York. I'm going to get a bunch of draft picks. Oh, now I'm going to send this role player to Boston, and that's going to make them better. And I'm hoping that they're going to be so much better that no matter what success you might have, you're going to keep losing, and maybe that draft pick's a little bit better from the Utah side. So I can see that happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can move on from trades now. Thank you for humoring me at the very least. But I briefly did want to touch on Luke Cornett just to get your thoughts, because obviously, if they're fine with it, they could sign a veteran center. Are you comfortable with Luke Cornett playing those sort of, okay, Al Horford's going to sit a back-to-back, Robert Williams is injured because obviously Gallinari, et cetera. Are you fine with him playing like spot minutes for the Celtics when inevitably big men miss time?
Yeah. Look, first, let me clarify something. I don't mind talking about trades. What drives me nuts is, here's a fake trade I came up with. Tell me what you think about it. Like
next time I'll make sure to have
says no.
I'll talk about trade rumors. I'll talk about potential trades.
Yeah.
I'll talk about the Donovan Mitchell situation, the KD situation all day long. But anyway, Luke Cornett, he's fine. He's fine as a third big right now, especially October, November, December. He's fine. I think people kind of don't realize he's not some stiff. I mean, he's not great, but he's not some stiff. He can go out there and catch alley-oops. He can block some shots. He's a big guy. He looks like, a bit goofy, but he's actually not bad. And he has NBA experience. So he's okay. He's fine. Do you want better than okay and fine for your third big? Probably. So you roll with it until you can see if something better comes along. But for now, especially when you consider this isn't just a straight backup big, like, oh, we've got to take one of our bigs out, we have to put Luke Cornett in. No, you can take one of your bigs out and put Grant Williams in. And then you can take the other big out and you can put, Malcolm Brogdon in and you go small. Or you could take, Grant Williams out and put the first big that went out back
Gallinari in. Too, yeah.
Gallinari can take a swing at it. Luke Cornett can play some, but I don't think 5 minutes of Luke Cornett is going to be like taking the back rotor off of off of a helicopter and watching it spin and crash to the ground. Like it's not going to be. I mean, maybe it will be. Maybe it will be. I can't say for sure that it won't be. Maybe it will, but I think if you put him in for like 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever it is at a time. And you just let Al sit a couple extra minutes, let Rob sit a couple extra minutes. And like I said, you can go small with other options and be fine. And it should be okay. It should all be okay. And then if the trade market comes around and hey, here's a decent guy that we can count on more, then you go for that. And then maybe you trade Luke Cornett away later on at the deadline and say, that's how you save some of the money. And you attach a fake second rounder to Luke Cornett and you throw him into somebody's cap space and you throw that team $1 million in cash to pay for waiving him or whatever. And they're fine. Teams do that favor for each other all the time because that's how business gets done. So that I think it's fine for now. And at some point they can go and find a better option.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, like we were saying, Luke's going to play 5 minutes every 10 days. It's not the end of the world. Transitioning here, we can make this sort of the last thing because I know, time is money, as I say. But the first time we ever had you on this podcast, we talked about summer league stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to kind of transition that. And Sam brought this up, and it was a good idea. This was the first finals I saw you tweet about that you've gotten to cover. So I was wondering if there's stories or give us some insight, if you wouldn't mind, about your experience covering the finals, stuff like that. Because I mean, I can imagine it was
the rules,
amazing, right? Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's completely different. It's so all season long. It's you go to the Garden and the Celtics PR is in charge, and there are rules to when a coach is available and all of that. Finals, it's actually starting with the conference finals. The NBA starts to get involved. So, and that's when you see guys up on the podium. That's when you hear, I have to announce who I am all of a sudden, versus like people who might watch a post game on NBC Sports Boston. You just hear my voice, right? Mm-hmm. If you're watching post game and I'm asking a question, I just walk up to a microphone and you just hear me asking a question. But when the NBA comes along, they say you have to say who you are and who you're with before you ask the question. So you start to get a little bit more formality to that. The finals is a complete crush of media, where a normal game, you have 2 guys from the Globe, a guy from the Herald, 2 guys from the Athletic, 2 guys from Mass Live, me, and then so that's 8. Might be a couple of extra guys depending on maybe a couple of CLNS guys. So you're like 10 Celtics writers, round up to a dozen. And that's it. Whereas, so, we have a little media workroom. In the finals, they clear out like a whole side of the building and put like probably like 20, 30 big like cafeteria type tables. And that's where everybody's working. And you need all of those spaces filled because now the entire world is trying to cover this event. So there are so many more people there. Everything is exponentially bigger, and it's I don't know. You feel like the specter of like the world. It becomes almost like a social event. You start to see people that you only see on Twitter. You see people who like, oh wow, hey, how's it going? And you introduce yourself. It's kind of wild. Anyone
in particular that was like stuck out?
No, like. The coolest interaction I had was with Doris Burke, who I love. And I will say, I mean, I met like media people from just general media people. My coolest finals interaction, I was walking from the floor through like the player tunnel, where the players going after. That's also the media tunnel. So we use the same entrance, and I'm walking in and Doris Burke is walking out, and I say hi. She says hi. And then she says, so what do you think? So immediately I'm like, oh, okay. I'm chatting with Doris Burke now. And like, So I, start talking and whatever. And then she walks away and she says, "Hey, great stuff all season." I was like, what? Like she knows who I am. She listens to the podcast. And I'm just like, at that point, I'm like, yeah, you too. Obviously, you're a legend. And I'm like, oh my God, all of a sudden I turned 14. So that was like a wow moment. Like I've had that moment with her, and I had a moment with Jackie McMullen at the Chicago All-Star game where I was just walking by. She was talking to somebody in the hallway. I was walking by and I just kind of like nodded because I didn't want to interrupt her conversation. And she says, "Hey, John." And I'm like, oh, she knows my name. So I totally marked out there. So those two interactions were super cool. And the other super cool thing that I did, the NBA has like charter flights. Normally I would book my own travel to go like to Milwaukee or to Miami or whatever. The NBA offers charter flights because there's so much media. They, here's a set rate, and we'll put you on a bus and get you to the tarmac, and you don't have to go through the same security. You don't have to go through, like, you do have to do a version of TSA, but it's a chartered flight. But it's one of the planes that they use. There's two planes. There was at this anyway. One of the planes is the backup team plane. So the Warriors have a plane, the Celtics have a plane, and there's a backup plane that in case there's an issue with one of those, they'll kick the media off. The team can take it over, and then the media has to sit and wait for the problem to be fixed. So they obviously didn't have any problems with their plane. So I am now on a charter flight that is the same plane the teams use. And you see like the tables where the guys would play cards, and you can see the setup, and I can see like the front of the plane. First of all, every seat is like a first class size seat. The front of the plane, there are four, very obviously, this is where the front court sits, because there's probably 8 feet of leg room between, like, they can, like, Taco Fall could sit in the chair and spread his legs out and be comfortable. So you can see a little bit of the, hey, okay, I get, like, this is how the team flies, and you get a little taste of how that works, which is super cool. But also you understand, like, it's still a plane, and even if every single plane is the same in that if you're over 6'2" or 6'3", you got to bend over, and it's uncomfortable to walk. And I'm not sure if everybody here listening understands or knows this. I'm going to break some news. Most NBA guys are over 6'2" or 6'3". So it's still like, you don't, even though it's a charter flight, you don't get to like get up and there's a disco ball and dance party or anything like that. You still have to hunch over, like Jaylen Brown has to hunch over, and it's still uncomfortable. So yes, they get these cool chartered flights and the plane is awesome, but it's still a plane. And so the travel is better, certainly better than any travel you're going to get unless you're always flying first class. But it's still travel. And so you really get a good perspective of all of that.
My mom works for Delta. She's a flight attendant, and her friend does the Celtics sometimes. So once in a while, I'll get to hear some stories. My mom did the Nuggets this year, and they eat like kings. I mean, the food's fantastic. My mom will get to bring some home once in a while. So, geez, I can't keep hitting my wire. Sorry. Enough about my mom.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the one thing we didn't get. I think we got like
really
food. I don't think we got any of what the guys were eating.
Oh, that's the worst. See, even I get what the guys eat.
It was good. Good food. Good. It's just like they're not serving me prime rib or anything like that. Like
nothing elite. But that's I just wanted to ask about your finals experience, because that's awesome. Obviously,
yeah, it's
rare you get to cover
fantastic.
team that deep into the playoffs. But I think that about wraps it up. I had written down here Grant Williams' recent media tour of just being everywhere in the media because I am probably the biggest Grant Williams fan you'll meet. But we don't have to go in depth in that. I just thought it was funny. I saw a tweet that Sam sent it to me. I'm a huge Grant Williams guy, and one of
our friends is not.
One of our buddies who's always on the show, Timmy G, hates Grant Williams. So we go back and forth about it. And there was a tweet that said, why is Grant Williams all over the place right now? He was good for like 2 months. They should trade him. And I'm sitting here like losing my mind because like I'll never understand the Grant hate because it just doesn't make sense to me anymore. But I got it last year, but this year, like how? I mean, how are you gonna?
Come on, man. Like I get it. He's on like some big tour, but also it was all in Las Vegas, and you know he's a players union VP, so I'm sure all of the guys want to get a little time with him, and so he showed up on a few podcasts. Like, big deal.
I like the I think it was July 4th of him, Drake, Jason Tatum. Like he was just with all the stars at that one.
Robert Kraft. I love how Robert Kraft is at all these things.
Yeah.
What do they talk about?
Grant seemed a little out of place at that. You know, it's like, oh, here's Drake. Oh, it's Tatum. Oh, it's LeBron. Oh, it's Grant Williams.
You gotta love it.
Okay. Hey, good for him.
Maybe he's gonna be a star next year. He's average 20. He'll be in the All-Star game. You know, he's the dude. I'll stand by it. I'll back Grant Williams up till the end of time. But yeah, that's all we had, Sam. Unless there was anything you wanted to bring up quick.
Good.
But yeah, thank you, John, for joining us. We appreciate it. Hopefully, you'll be back for a 6th time. We didn't scare you away this time around.
This is easier than Skype. So I think we've made a better impression. We used to have to go through Skype. StreamYard, easy work.
This is much easier.
Oh yeah, this rules.
StreamYard is we've upgraded. We'll put it that way since we started. But thank you for joining. And correct me if I'm wrong. The Locked On Celtics #1 Celtics podcast out there right now. Is that correct? Am I correct for saying that? That's incredible. Congratulations. But I mean,
thank you. It was one of, at its peak. It was one of Apple's top, I think it went to 40 something in all basketball podcasts or all sports podcasts, all of sports podcasts.
Crazy.
So
amazing.
It was during the finals, it really shot up those rankings. So yeah, that's the other thing about covering a team that went into the finals. It's
nice little boost.
But also precipitous drop after that off the all
of course
right now. But hopefully that carries. Hopefully when the season starts, that people pick that back up again. So yeah, I'm enjoying a little bit of good times with the podcast.
There you go. I mean, still do daily though, right? Like, how do you, not to like dive too deep, but how do you find stuff right now to do? Like, I know there's probably like you can get creative and stuff, but like it has to be a lot different from going from finals and having stuff every day to right now where it's like,
Yeah. I mean, so I'll do. Obviously I had summer league to kind of carry me through.
Yeah.
So that was good. I get mailbag questions a lot, so I'll do a mailbag episode. This week, just kind of barely squeaking by, but Grant Williams doing that podcast gave me something to talk about in the on the Thursday podcast, and then. You start to broaden it out. You talk about the league a little bit. You start to figure out, okay, I can spend a little bit more time on a single topic and something that might've been a segment, a 10-minute segment. I can expand out to a 25-minute show and kind of just do 3 8-minute segments on it and really dive into it. And then you just, I don't know. Sometimes you just got to wing it. Sometimes you just got to, come up with something. You got to dig a little bit deeper. It's just, it's a little bit more challenging. I will say that August and September, I'll go down to 3 days a week just to calm it down. But still, it's 3 days a week in the dead of the NBA. So I still come up with something. So then you start looking at guys' Instagram feeds a lot. And seeing where they are.
It's like before the bubble when you looked at like all the Instagram feeds of what food they were eating and everything.
Yeah. You come up with concepts. You come up with like I could spend a whole week doing each guy in the starting 5. Here's my Marcus Smart podcast. Here's my, and you can do what ifs. You do a what if podcast. Hey, what if they do this? What if they do that? You know, guests become big, and you get different people's opinions on what if they do this. And, you can always find something. There's always something to, if you keep an open mind and dig a little bit, you can always find something to talk about. And very clearly, I have no problem just yammering on. So that's a deterrent, or that's a bad trait. But for a podcaster, it's something that can really help me get through a show.
Well, not only a podcaster, but you do it by yourself, which is the most impressive thing to me. You do a show by yourself most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I've brought Tom Westerholm on for a couple of days a week to kind of take some of that pressure off. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something that it works for me. I have no problem. I spend a lot of time just talking to myself anyway. So whether there's a camera on me or not, I don't think internally. I always think out loud. So it's I don't know. It's something that I can get through. Once I keep going, once I get going, very easy to keep going.
There you go. Well, I'll be looking out for the What If Grant Williams Got 20 Shots a Game podcast this summer. That'll be my personal favorite one. If you get to it, just throwing ideas out there, spitballing for you. But
he would score 15 points a game.
Come on. Give me a break.
Well, how many shots anyways, taking games? All right, that's enough of that.
You took 18 threes? Was it 18 threes? Something
impressive,
like that?
Impressive.
Something crazy. Anyways, thank you, John. We appreciate you joining us on Twitter at John_Karalis, Boston Sports Journal, Locked On Celtics podcast. Did I miss anything? I often miss stuff. Got it all.
Yeah.
The book, of course. The Boston Celtics all-time All-Stars. Love it. Thank you. 5th time on the show. Hopefully we, like I said, didn't scare you away. Thank you guys all for listening. And per usual, Sam, I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening or watching. If you're watching, we're on YouTube at Guy Boston or Bannertown. Regardless, make sure you like, share, subscribe. If you're on Guy Boston, you can catch our live streams before every game. We always do the pregame, an assortment of Jack, me, Tim, KJ. We're always there most of the time, give or take a few. But make sure you follow John on Twitter. We appreciate him coming on at John_Karalis. He's everywhere. He is the #1 Celtics podcast. Make sure you check it out. He's pumping them out daily, down to 3 days a week, like he just told you. And you can follow Jack at JackSmut NBA. He's doing all kinds of stuff. You can follow at From Rafters Pod for when Jack does tweet out the pod. You can follow me at Sam LaFrance NBA for me probably complaining about something. That's our show for the week.